As you know, I'm Casey, and this is Interventions Episodes.
I'm Liz, and we're here today with our amazing speaker, Ben.
Hey, everybody, I'm Ben.
And today, Ben is talking with us about design safety. So, first question, we want to know, what is design safety?
So design safety is pretty much psychological safety, which is not my idea. It is the idea of Amy Edmonson, who's a professor at Harvard Business School. And her basic idea is that organizations perform better when the people in them feel psychologically safe, which is to say that they are comfortable asking questions, comfortable being wrong. They don't feel that they'll be punished for being wrong. And her thinking is that when these conditions are present, it's easier for people to have new ideas. So I've basically just taken that, and I haven't written a book or anything. She's much cooler than I am. But I have thought about her ideas against the backdrop of design, specifically because I know from all of my years of designing and managing designers that design only works when people feel safe. There's no point in designing something that's already been built. You're both designers, so you understand this. The idea is to come out at the other end with something new. And new is hard because it typically challenges people. In the organization, within your team, it may challenge you personally. And so if you feel safe, you're more apt to come up with a new idea, to build something new. And the more likely it is that that new thing will have a life. It will go on to do its job. So design safety is really just psychological safety within the context of a design team or a design activity.
You already talked a little about why it's so important, what the benefits are from practicing design safety, but what's the risk of not prioritizing design safety?
The most immediate risk that I have experienced is a really unhappy design team. And this may sound trivial, right? I think a lot of times people are like, designers are so whiny. They want everything to be how they want it to be. But it's actually a pretty big risk for an organization when a design team doesn't feel challenged. And if they don't feel that they're able to bring their best selves to work and to bring the most value as possible to the organization, it can create a pattern of detachment and low investment in their work. And that's not something you want from any employee in any team. You want people to feel like they're contributing as much value as possible. So if you don't have a safe space for them to work, they kind of check out a little bit and say, okay, well, you know what? It's not really worth it to try and push forward new ideas. So I'm just going to do the absolute minimum I need to and look for another job on the side or, something like that. And I see this in a lot of organizations that I work with. They have underinvesting in a design team just leads to these kinds of long-term problems. And they're wondering why they're not getting as much value from their design team. And they say things to me because I consult with some startups, they'll say things like, design's not working. It's just not working. And they don't know why. And so a lot of what I work with them on is implementing the conditions for safety, which builds a long-term plan for the design team to work.
Within that, how do you create safety for yourself?
Psychological safety starts at home. So as a manager and a designer, I do design projects as well, you have to give yourself permission to have new ideas and to fail and to ask questions first. Then it's like you have to create a little bubble of safety that you take with you everywhere you go. Number one, to protect yourself. I think any designer who's working has been in a situation where they felt not fully supported or like their bravery or their questions that they were asking was somewhat attacked. I know that when I came into my most recent management role at Hubspot, I interviewed all the designers and I talked to them one-on-one when I first got there, and they all told me the same thing. We can't ask questions here, right? And so what I would say to each of them is you first need to give yourself permission to ask questions and know at a deep level that that's okay. So you create a safety inside as a way to sort of set the bar, like I will this is where I will work and I won't work anywhere else. Like I need to work in a place where I can ask questions, be wrong, feel safe. And if that's not the case, I'm walking. And it's easier said than done for a lot of designers, but particularly when you're early in your career. But having that standard is kind of like, no one's gonna shut me up. No one's gonna put me in a corner, kind of thing. And then also, I will sometimes, if I'm in a situation where there's not a lot of safety, I will self-narrate. So this is something that a designer can do. When I'm talking about my work to another designer or to a non-designer, I'll say, I was working on this and I had these ideas and then I followed them, but I realized that these 4 didn't work at all. So I abandoned them. And then this one I kind of put on the back burner. And then this one I pushed forward. And when I pushed it forward, I realized this would work, but I kind of have to go back to the drawing board a little bit. So I basically would make transparent the fact like I didn't get it right away. I would be vulnerable to people. And this gets into our next topic, which is how can you create safety for non-designers? So by having the wherewithal to be vulnerable myself, I'm showing other people that like I can create a safe space for you also. Insofar as it's okay for me to be wrong, by extension, it's okay for you to be wrong. And this is kind of infectious. It creates a group dynamic where being wrong is not bad and being wrong is not punished, particularly when you're in a leadership position.
Can you tell us a little bit more about how you can create safety for your teammates and your fellow designers? If
you're in a management position, then the responsibility is very real. I would say that if you are a design manager, that is your only responsibility, or that's your primary responsibility. And as a younger designer going into a job, right, this is something that I think younger designers need to be aware of. I would even ask this when they say in a job interview, do you have any questions for us? I would just ask, yes, how do you create safety on your team? What are the methods? What are the tools that you use to make sure that each of the designers on your team can ask questions, can be wrong, won't be punished? And if they struggle with that answer, I'm not saying don't take the job, but at least you know what you're getting yourself into, right? I saw a tweet recently and it was like someone had spouted off like, designers need to do X and Y and Z, and someone else, prolific other person, chimed in and was like, yeah, every designer wants to do that, but they're totally shut down by their boss. Like, you can be good at the tools and techniques and methods, but you're only going to go as far as your organizational structure and culture will allow. And it's 9 times out of 10, designers struggle for that reason and not because they don't have the actual skills. So it's a skill unto itself is to detect and vet the organization you're going into. Again, not easily done. So if you're blah, 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 sidetrack, if you're a manager, it's like it's exclusively your responsibility. If you are not managing people, then you are leading in place. This means that you cultivate leadership properties without actually managing anybody, without anybody reporting to you. And that's leading by example. And so what I talked about earlier becomes very important. You have to set the bar for how designers should be treated. I have an anecdote that relates to this. I had a great work coach when I was at Hubspot, and I was a director of design and I worked with the director of engineering. And we all know that designers and engineers need to be like best buds. They need to work together really well. And my fabulous coach said, Ben, you and the director of engineering need to model that behavior. So you and the director of engineering need to become best friends and show that friendship to everybody in the team. Show that the two of you are close, you love each other, you're getting beers, whatever it takes. And so I think a lot of that should be happening at the team level. Liz, let's say you and I are 2 designers on a team. The way that we treat each other is going to teach the organization how we expect to be treated, right? If I give you space to be wrong and to play around with ideas and to experiment, and if I, even when your ideas challenge me, if I still listen, if I give you a chance to explain yourself, I am showing people this is how it's done, right? This is how design is done. And we're extremely social creatures. We learn by watching. We learn very often by imitation. And so setting that standard between designers can be just as important outside the scope of management.
So how do you create safety for your non-design stakeholders?
So this is a big one. It can be very easy to feel like you are the designer, capital T, capital D, and you need to come in with the goods, right? You got to have beautiful designs. You need to understand the process. You need to tell people what to do. There can be some, what do they call that? Imposter syndrome, where you're like compensating. And so you're really, really like, here's what we do and da, da, da. When the opposite can actually be true, being an effective designer, working with non-designers is more, in my experience, about putting your know-how on the back burner and figuring out how much they know about design. So the focus goes from how much do I know, what can I do, over to them, what do they know about design? What has been their experience working with designers? Do they consider themselves a designer? Why or why not? You know, even if they've not been to design school. I mean, I have worked with many people who will say to me, I understand design. And I say, have you ever done a design project? No, but I understand how it works. And so understanding, taking the temperature of the non-design stakeholder is going to help you calibrate where you need to come in as a designer. Because you can come in with whiz-bang, fantastic design solution, but if they hate purple, and that's what design means to them, then you can't have any purple in your design. Sorry, even if it's the right color or whatever else, like you just can't. Or you can, but you have to work with them on that, right? You need to sit down with them, maybe over a beer, and say, so tell me about purple. What's with you in purple? What happened there? What did purple do to you? How did purple hurt you? And it takes time and it takes listening skills, but it pays off a millionfold. This fantastic coach I had also told me something, which is still with me. People don't care what you know until they know that you care. And so no one gives a whit about how much you know about design and design thinking and all that stuff until they know that you care about them. So for a non-design stakeholder, they have a non-design problem that they need solved. They don't need a web page built. They need their conversion rate to increase by 25% by the end of the quarter. And we're extremely well served as designers to get outside of design and ask those questions. And what we're doing in that scenario is we're creating safe space for them, right, to be who they are and talk about their frustrations. And we're also creating a safe space for them to not know everything they need to know about design. They might not understand it. And we need to make that okay.
How is the implementation of design safety affected by the environment that you're working in?
So I talked earlier about management. And having been a manager, I understand very intimately how easy it is to screw it up and what a big skill it is. And so for designers going into any organizational setting, I would say really vet your manager, call around, ask people what it's like to work there as a designer, ask what the challenges are. When you're interviewing, ask them what their challenges are in the design team. And if they don't tell you that there are any, they're lying. So you want to understand, is my manager or management team, is leadership supporting me in the right way going into a role? Are they able to speak about safety? Do they have the vocabulary? Has the conversation been started inside that organization? I think that's a smart thing to ask. It's just that. You need a great leader. You need someone who, and again, I speak from experience, it is not an easy thing to do. Somebody who embodies at all times patience, open-mindedness, open-heartedness, and that is a really, really big skill. I think, this is a personally held opinion, but I think that men have not been acculturated to really embody those qualities. I think that a lot of senior leadership is just by legacy, tends to be male dominated. And so there's a lot of work there. I don't think that men specifically are born with these qualities. I just think that our society has ask them to be that way, or that we've equated that with leadership, this sort of like top down, father knows best kind of thing. And most of what I've learned about this, I've learned from women or female identified people, or non-male individuals, at least, right? Like folks that don't subscribe to that style of leadership, that patriarchal style of leadership, right? So it's a willingness to be wrong, a willingness to learn, being able to say, like, if your manager is able to say, I don't know the answer to that. What do you think? Or what do you think? Or why don't we all figure this out together? Those are the signals that I look for at an organizational level, that I feel like, okay, good. This is a place that design can thrive and really do its job and deliver truly innovative solutions, like stuff we haven't thought of before, which is really the ultimate goal.
Do you feel like if like there's somewhere you want to work, you love the organization and what it is, but then you find that it doesn't have that safety, then it's probably not worth it, right? Like, I don't know.
I wouldn't say that. I firmly believe that every experience is worth it. So I don't see good experiences or bad experiences. I just see educational experiences. So even in the most quote unquote toxic environments that I have been in for design, I've learned a lot about my own limits, first and foremost. What am I capable of? What am I not capable of withstanding? But also I've learned how to find what's good in that situation and learn from it and take it with me. Like I said, some of the hardest experiences in my life, I look back and I'm like, oh yeah, but there was this one person or these three people that sort of guided me through. And at key moments during those stressful times, I learned these like key things. Like I was trying to transform all of design at Hubspot. I was like such a fool. I went in and I'm like, I'm going to like classic. I'm like, I'm going to like fix everything and I'm going to like do all this stuff. And like, here's the plan and pew, pew, pew. And one of the designers there, we were talking once and she was just like, she was also a manager. She was like, you probably can't do that here. I'm like, are you okay? And I was like, she's like, if you can't do that here, are you okay? Like, is this basically what she was saying is like, is this an ego trip for you? And it was, and having the ability to look at that and look at myself and say, yeah, I came in and it was all about me and that ain't it. So even though the situation was really difficult, that's an invaluable lesson, right? That's a career changing thing to meditate on. So I would say if the situation is not ideal, the advice is don't avoid it. Just go in with the knowledge. Knowledge is power. I know what I'm getting myself into and I know what I want to walk away with.
What is the hardest part of creating safety?
If people on the team have turned off, if they've been in an unsafe environment for long enough, they've actually given up. Cynicism, in a word, right? If someone is just like, why bother? I'm not going to try. Like it's been like this for so long. I've tried before and failed. And then I tried again and failed and I'm tired and I'm worn down. That to me it's almost insurmountable, right? How do you come back from that as a person, as a team? I think is really impossible. There has to be some kernel inside of you, of each designer that says it's possible, right? Even though it's never been that way before, it's possible that we can do it. Because once there's that sense of possibility, everything becomes possible.
What is the biggest takeaway that we should walk away from as design students?
You're a designer. I think coming out of design school, I was so panicked about like, am I good enough? Do I know what I'm doing? And Casey made this point. I think you both have made this point that like, you have that down. Like the design part, either everything you need to know, you'll keep learning, but like you're where you need to be on that level. Like you understand how to use Sketch and you understand what a design system is and you understand how to do an empathy interview and kind of like put that on the side burner. Don't put it on the back burner, but like put it on the side burner, because you have this whole other burner that is people skills. And that is where the steepest curve is going to be for you coming into your first role. So be ready for that. Be open to it. Talk about it amongst your friends. Create space for that conversation in your life, because it's such a real learning curve and is so important. And if you can master it, even just a little bit, not master it, but if you can get good at talking about it and get comfortable in that space of like, and the people skills is, how do I form meaningful relationships at work? How do I influence the people around me, right? People that maybe don't want to do design, how can I convince them that we should? Someone who doesn't want to budget for research, how can I convince them that we should? How do I create safety for myself, for the people around me? How do I ask that of my boss? Those are all the people skills, and they're hard. But gaining some advantage there will quickly set you apart. That is what we're interviewing for when we interview, right? How well is this person going to handle a shitty situation? It's a given that you know how to do an interview. It's a given that you know how to put together a UI. You wouldn't get the interview otherwise. What they're looking for is people skills. And as a side note, I could be speaking just from personal experience, but I got into design because I'm introverted. I got into design because I was like, this is great. I just sit at a computer. Like, I don't have to talk to anybody. I don't need to deal with people. And I think I had this idealized impression that like, oh yeah, design means I never have to like go there with people. I don't have to form deep relationships. And it all seemed dirty to me, influencing people, convincing them to do things. I'm like, that's like deceptive. It's deceptive, and it's politics, and it's Machiavellian. And it wore me down to the point where I was like, this is non-negotiable. This is something I have to do. And I started way too late in my career. I realized that like 10 years in. But everything changed. My work started going a lot better. And then I realized, this is the real mind blower. Then I realized it's not politics. It's not Machiavellian. These are people. These are people with experiences and opinions and feelings, and that stuff matters. And by ignoring that, I wasn't just slowing my career down. I was kind of disrespecting humanity in a way. And so now when I go to work and I'm at work, I'm like, I'm fascinated by the people. Like, it's actually a beautiful thing to sit and come to understand what a stakeholder knows about design and what they don't. And to come into their world the same way you would with a user in a user interview, right? Like, you sort of fall in love with them because you gain such a sense of empathy. And so I think what I'm getting at, and you can tell I'm pretty long-winded, don't be afraid of it. It's a beautiful thing to understand people, and to create this space is such a beautiful and rewarding thing, not just as a designer, but as a person. And it's like, it has led to a lot of fulfillment for me.
So this game is called Over Under. So essentially, we'll give you a thing. We'll say a thing, tangentially design related. And you can just tell us if you think it is overrated or if you think it is underrated and why. First one we have is YouTube tutorials.
Underrated. No one's going to teach you software. Like, no one taught me software. No one ever sat me down and taught me software. Like, my first boss kind of did, but 95% of it was me Googling and watching YouTube tutorials. That's like how I learned every piece of software that I know. Yeah,
I think there's a lot of truth to that. I agree. And
there's so many. Once you have that skill of how to teach yourself software through tutorials, you can learn anything.
I think the hard part is finding the right tutorials, or like you're trying to figure out how to do something, but you don't know like how to search for it and like find
or what it's called. So then you Google the wrong thing for like an hour until you accidentally stumble upon it. Yep.
Upon the right term. Like, oh, that's called a clipping path. Mm-hmm. I thought it was just like a moving dotted line.
Yeah.
The next over under is the Google Suite, like Google Docs, Google Slides, all of them.
I would say underrated again. Well, for a lot of the reasons I talked about, Figma, like being able to collaborate, having everything stored in the cloud so that your laptop can you can drop it down a sewer and Everything's like right where you left it. I think that's great. And I also encourage my students to use Google Slides for their final presentations because it's completely compatible. There's no compatibility font issues. And again, if you are on your way to the presentation and you drop your laptop, you can just grab someone else's and run the exact same presentation from that laptop. I think where it's overrated is like, I've been using it for probably 5 or 10 years. I don't know. And Google owns all my stuff. Like it's all locked in this proprietary format that like, it's all stored in my Drive account. I have like 1.2 terabytes of stuff in there. And it's like, whatever is a Google Doc, there's no coming out. Like I can't back that up onto a hard drive locally the way that I could with other types of files. And so it's a bit of an issue there.
And next one is computer mouse.
Overrated.
The physical.
I like this take already.
I started my career as a production assistant. So I was doing design production on it with a mouse and completely ruined my forearm, like just ruined it. Got repetitive strain injury, was laid up for a while, dealt with that for years. So I just don't love the ergonomics of it. Being on a mouse, you have to always lift up, and all of this got tight and sort of scar tissue-y, and it was very painful. And so now I use a Magic trackpad, which I think the hand position is a lot more.
I love those.
You can kind of be a little bit.
Nice.
You're not like this. You're just kind of like this, and I love it.
Thank you so much, Ben, for taking the time to talk to us today.
It was awesome to chat with you both.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Sorry, my dog lost it.
We have
kind of dog?
2 tomorrow.
Yeah, and we have 2 tomorrow. This is Patron.
It's the cutest dog ever.